In 2006, there was a small, charming little indie film released that went by the title of Little Miss Sunshine. And it's the story of a semi-dysfunctional family and their trip to the Little Miss Sunshine pageant, where the youngest member of the family, a girl named Olive, hopes to compete and to take home the title. And as these kinds of stories tend to go, the bulk of the movie is really about the trip to the pageant and the lessons that they learn and the ups and the downs of the experience. It's a pretty good little film. But the other child in this family is a 15-year-old boy named Dwayne. He's really the one I want to focus on. So Dwayne wants to be a fighter pilot. It's his dream to fly jets through the sky and to be in the military. And so even at 15 years old, he is disciplining his body. He's working out, he's doing weights and setups and crunches and stuff, but he's also trying to discipline his mind. And so he takes a vow of silence. So for the first bulk of the film, Dwayne has no lines at all. He's very expressive. He has like little signs he holds up and makes faces and stuff. He's a pretty good actor, but nothing is said. That is until about 3/4 of the way through the film when Dwayne learns through a conversation with his uncle that he's actually colorblind, which means he's never going to be able to fly jets in the military. And in that instant, trapped in a van full of people he can barely tolerate, this kid's whole world just comes crashing down around him. And he begins shaking the van's seats and motioning for them to pull the van over. And so when the vehicle finally comes to a rest at the side of the road, he bursts through the van door, he runs out, hits his knees, and at the 1 hour, 7-minute mark of the film, Dwayne shouts his very first line into the sky. It's only one word, it's 4 letters. I'll let you use your imagination. But it's a very painful moment in the film, and it's a very powerful moment in the film, especially if you've been there before, which most of us have, frankly. We've all been in that moment where it feels like the bottom falls out and our whole world just comes crashing down all around us. Those moments stink. Now, maybe for you, it wasn't discovering you're colorblind. Maybe it was a business that you had. And you put everything you had into that business. Your blood, your sweat, your tears, your time, your energy. You sacrificed. You gave so much of yourself to make this thing work. And it still folded anyway. Or maybe for you it was a marriage, and you did everything you could to save that marriage. You went to counseling, you made personal changes, you rearranged your life, did things you never thought you would do, but your back was against the wall and you wanted to save the marriage, and you tried so hard, but it just still wasn't enough. And the relationship fell apart anyway. Or maybe you had a diagnosis, and you tried every medication that the doctor prescribed. You tried every procedure and treatment that they could imagine. You were scouring the internet for every home remedy, and you tried them all, regardless of how crazy it was. And none of it made a difference. None of it could heal what you had. We've all had those moments. And if you haven't, buckle up, because you will. It's just part of life to get in those moments where it feels like it all comes crashing down around you. And we hate those moments because they hurt. And they don't just hurt a little bit, they hurt a lot. And that's why we tend to view these moments as entirely irredeemable, because they hurt and because they're so tragic. And yet even these moments, maybe even especially these moments, these are moments where God draws near and is near us in a very particular and special kind of way. Even these can be holy moments where God reaches in and changes the whole story because of what happens in these horrible moments. And there's maybe no better illustration of this than the story of Good Friday, as Luke tells it in chapters 22 and 23 of his gospel. These are probably some of the most tragic chapters in all the Bible. They are hands down the most painful hours of Jesus' life. And not just physically. Jesus experiences so much rejection and betrayal and relational tumult during these chapters. I mean, chapter 22, we have the Last Supper, and then he goes into the Garden of Gethsemane where he's going to pray. And immediately after he finishes praying, his friend, Judas, a guy he has spent nearly every moment with for the last 3 years, marches up to him with a band of guards and kisses him as an act of betrayal and says, "Rabbi, it's good to see you," and then everybody arrests him. Now, this wasn't anything that shocked Jesus. He knew this was coming. But it's still got to hurt to have somebody that you care about and that you thought was your friend betray you so blatantly and brazenly. And after this, Jesus is marched to a trial where he has to stand and listen to false witnesses, give slanderous accusations and mischaracterizations of him and his words. And again, not anything Jesus didn't see coming, but if you've ever been in that situation where you just have to sit there and let people lie about you, it makes your blood boil, and it hurts. It's a hard moment. And then after this false farce of a trial concludes, we read about an even deeper betrayal that happens. This time it's not Judas, it's the Apostle Peter. Now, Jesus earlier in the evening, he had told Peter, "You're going to deny even knowing me 3 different times." And of course, Peter said, "No, Jesus, not me. I never do that." But sure enough, the evening progresses. Jesus is arrested. Peter follows to the courtyard outside where Jesus is being tried. And people throughout the evening come up to him. "Hey, don't we know you? Weren't you with that Jesus guy?" And twice already he said, "No, I don't even know the guy." And then Luke tells us about the third denial in chapter 22, verse 59. It goes like this. About an hour later, another asserted, "Certainly this fellow was with him, for he's a Galilean." And Peter replied, "Man, I don't know what you're talking about." And just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. And the Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. And then Peter remembered the word that the Lord had spoken to him. "Before the rooster crows today, you will disown me 3 times." And he went outside and he wept bitterly. So Peter's out in the courtyard. Again, another person comes up to him. Don't you know that Jesus guy?" And as the words leave his mouth, Jesus is being brought out from his trial, marched across that same courtyard, and they lock eyes. And Jesus knows what Peter has done. And Peter knows what he has done. And in that moment, somebody that may have been Jesus' best friend over the last 3 years completely throws him under the bus and denies even knowing him. That has got to cut deep. And after all of that relational betrayal and turmoil has concluded, now Jesus begins the actual physical pain of the evening, where he's beaten by guards, where he's scourged with a cat of 9 tails, where he's marched up the hill of the skull, and he's crucified. His body stretched across rough-hewn timber as nails are driven through his wrists and his ankles. He's hoisted into the air to suffocate under the weight of his own body as people gather around to mock and ridicule him as he slowly suffocates to death. He even has to endure the jeers of the criminals crucified on either side of him. And at this moment, when he's fully rejected, when he's completely disowned by humanity, that's when the bottom finally falls out and it all comes crashing down. Luke chapter 23, verse 44. "It was now about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m, for the sun stopped shining. And the curtain of the temple was torn in 2. And Jesus called out with a loud voice, 'Father, into your hands I commit my spirit.' And when he had said this, he breathed his last." 3 years of ministry, 3 years of preaching and healing and spending time with the poor and the downtrodden, a lifetime of upright living. None of it could stop what was happening. None of it could keep the bottom from falling out and the walls come crashing down. That's Good Friday. And if we didn't know what would happen in a few short days on Sunday, if all we knew was the story of Jesus' life up to Friday, we might look at this and say, this has got to be the most tragic, terrible story imaginable. And you'd be right. In fact, even though Sunday happens, you're still right. The good news of Sunday does not undo the terrible tragedy of Friday. It still hurts. It's still a terrible moment. but it's also a moment with incredible potential because of what God does a few short days later. The glory and the hope of Easter Sunday is only possible because of what happened on Friday. And that's what makes this moment, terrible and awful as it was, a holy moment, where God reached in even to this and changed everything. You see, Good Friday reminds us that even broken moments have redemptive potential. Now, the apostles and the biblical writers, they would reflect on the cross and on Good Friday for quite a while, years, decades, centuries, in fact, after it happened. But even a few short weeks after the crucifixion, the Apostle Peter has already been reflecting on this. And he stands before a crowd of people on the day of Pentecost, and he preaches to them in the book of Acts, chapter 2, starting in verse 23. It goes like this. This man was handed over to you by God's deliberate plan and foreknowledge. And you, with the help of wicked men, put him to death by nailing him to a cross. It was God's deliberate plan and foreknowledge. You might even say it was his desire that Jesus would have to undergo all of this. And we might ask why. Like, why was it so necessary for Jesus to endure all this? And there's a temptation to give the tried and true kind of surface level answer of Jesus had to die on the cross for the forgiveness of our sins. And that's absolutely true, but that's not really the question that I'm asking here. Why did Jesus have to endure such a degree of brokenness? Like, why couldn't it be something different? Like a beheading, something that's just sort of swift, it's done, there's no suffering, there's no agony, there's no betrayal, it's just quick, clean, sacrifice, sins forgiven. Why couldn't it be like that? Well, it really kind of comes down to something that the book of Hebrews has to say. In chapter 2, verse 10, it goes like this. In bringing many sons and daughters to glory, it was fitting that God, for whom and through whom everything exists, should make the pioneer of their salvation perfect through what he suffered. This is a really important passage for helping us to understand Jesus and the cross and what really took place there. And there's a lot to unpack here. We'll start with that idea of being perfect. Perfect is an idea that shows up a lot in the book of Hebrews. It's kind of a main theme. But in all of its usages, it really doesn't have much to pertain as far as like moral perfection is concerned. Really, it's speaking more to the connotation of, or has the connotation of being complete or fulfilling an intended purpose is probably the best way to put it. You might think about it like sounds strange, but like a cake. My dad, he makes this cake. We call it Better Than Anything cake. It goes by other names. But it's a chocolate cake, and it's got like liquid caramel drizzled all over it, and then it's got this whipped topping on top with like Heath chips sprinkled on it. It is delicious. I don't even like chocolate cake, and it's an amazing cake. It tastes incredible. Now, if you put it in the fridge after like a day, it doesn't look so incredible. All the caramel starts to like seep out and ooze out onto the pan, and it kind of looks like a hot mess, to be honest with you. But it doesn't matter, because nobody's getting that cake for the way that it looks. It's all about the taste, and in that aspect, is it's intended to be a delicious cake, it is perfect. But it would be different if you intended to make like a decoration out of cake. For example, my sons and I, we watch this guy on YouTube. He's like a fancy pastry chef guy. And he does a lot of sculptures out of chocolate. Like he'll make these huge, like 4-foot, 5-foot sculptures out of chocolate, and he'll like paint it with edible paint and stuff. And a lot of times it's for like corporate brands or corporate retreats or something. It's meant to be a giant display. Nobody's eating that thing, so it really doesn't matter what it tastes like. It's all about the look and the presentation. And in that aspect, they are perfect because they're beautiful sculptures. Who cares what they taste like? As long as it fulfills its intended purpose, as if it's complete, that's the idea of perfect that we're talking about. So we take it back to the book of Hebrews. How was Jesus made perfect through his suffering? And again, we have to think about what was God's intended purpose. Humanity had a purpose. God made us to live in fellowship and in harmony with him, with perfect trust, perfect faith, perfect love, this total, complete dependence and reliance upon him. That's how he made us. And one of the very first stories in the Bible, in Genesis chapter 3, is how we didn't trust God, we didn't have faith, we didn't have love. And then the story of the Bible ever since then is how we've continually, every single one of us, repeated that mistake, what we call sin, and rejected God and trusted ourselves. Humanity was not fulfilling its intended purpose. We were not perfect, you might say. Enter Christ. He was called to do what nobody had ever been able to do before, and that is to live in this perfect fellowship, trust, faith, and love before God. And throughout the majority of his life, he demonstrated this. He lived an upright life. He lived according to the law. He confessed this incredible faith. Even in Luke 22, in the Garden of Gethsemane, Father, not my will, but yours be done, if you remember him saying that. That's an incredible confession of faith. But confessing faith and actually living it out are two very different ventures. Jesus had the confession part done. Now he needed an opportunity to put on display and to live out this complete faith and trust in God. And that's what Good Friday was. The whole horrible evening is one grand stage upon which Jesus performs the faith that he confesses. And throughout all of the rejection, he continues to trust God. Throughout all of the injustice, he continues to trust God. Throughout all the pain and agony, he continues to trust God. Even his parting words in the book of Luke, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. This is not a fare thee well, cruel world, as some people imagine it to be. Jesus is quoting from the Psalms. In fact, it's a psalm that is all about trust in God's ability to deliver, even if it looks like things are bleak. That's Jesus' final words. He might as well have said, God, I still trust you anyway. And then he breathed his last. Till the bitter end, he was faithful. And in that way, Jesus was perfect. Yes, he was without sin. We're not questioning that. But it's essential we understand that Jesus fulfilled his calling and that Good Friday was the stage upon which he made that confession of faith complete. That was essential to him becoming perfect. So there's the perfection part of the passage. But why did all of this have to happen anyway? Like, why did he have to go through all of this? That actually comes to us a little earlier in the passage. Let's look back at Hebrews chapter 2, verse 10 again. In bringing many sons and daughters to glory, that is, into God's family, we should understand that. In bringing them into God's family, it was fitting, meaning it was right and it was proper, that God would perfect Christ through suffering. In other words, there was something about his pain. There was something about that utter brokenness that was essential. Not just for Jesus fulfilling his purpose, but for our sake. It was fitting for our sake that he would go through this experience of his whole world crashing down around him. And the very next verse helps us explain why. Look at Hebrews chapter 2, verse 11. For both the one who makes people holy, that's Jesus, and those who are made holy, that's you and I, are of the same family. So Jesus is not ashamed to call them brothers and sisters. In other words, for us to truly become like Jesus, for us to become members of God's household, to experience the hope and the promise that comes with that, in order to fully become like him, he had to fully become like us. And not just in the sense of having flesh and blood and then going on to live like an easy life with no problems. No, he had to be truly like us. People who have the bottom fall out and our whole world crashing down around us. Jesus had to go through that, and that was Good Friday. That was the moment where his faith and his mission was perfected. For us to truly be healed, he had to be utterly broken. It was necessary to his mission of mercy. And yet, even in the midst of that brokenness, he holds on to that faith, and God reaches in and makes that horrible moment a holy moment. And that same truth that Jesus puts on display for us to watch and learn from is one that God offers to us to live out and enact in our own lives. I mean, the same opportunity that Jesus had to live out his faith on the stage of his hardships, that's our opportunity when everything comes crashing down around us. It's our moment to live out this faith we confess, to trust God anyway, and to allow him to reach in and use our pain for holy purposes. But how in the world can pain be a holy moment? Well, I want you to think for a minute and just consider the way that pain has this unique ability to strip away everything inconsequential. I mean, if you go to the doctor and you hear those terrifying words, "You have cancer," there isn't a person alive who's going to hear those words and their first thought be, "Oh, I'm going to miss opening day at the ballpark." Nobody's going to hear those words and then think, "Oh, I really wanted to buy a new truck." None of that stuff matters. Everything unimportant and inconsequential is stripped away as you are laid bare, and the only thing you're thinking about are the things that truly matter. That's what pain does for us. And if you don't know what those important things are, pain is going to send you searching. You think about September 11th, 2001. The planes hit the towers, and literally our world came crumbling down all around us. And it sent people reeling. There was national pain because our security was stripped away, and our comfort was stripped away, and our sense of safety was stripped away. And that pain sent countless people searching for something that mattered. Every church in America was packed that next Sunday because people wanted something important. They wanted a safety that would not be stripped away. They wanted a security that could not be taken from them. That's what pain does. It sends us searching for something real. If you suffer a divorce, that pain is going to send you searching for a love that doesn't end. If the grave takes from you, that pain is going to send you searching for something that overcomes this world and lasts. Pain is like a fire in a lot of ways. In the wrong hands, left unchecked, it's going to burn down everything around it and cause untold destruction. But in the right hands of somebody who knows how to use it, who keeps an eye on it and focuses it, that same fire can temper a blade. It can remove the dross from metal and purify gold. It can be an immensely beneficial experience, even if it hurts. That's the potential of pain. That's what these broken moments are for us. They're opportunities, and we could choose to allow the pain to overcome us and allow the brokenness to have its way. But in doing so, we miss out on a potentially holy moment to take God by the hand and let him reach into our story the same way he did to Jesus's on that Good Friday, and to change everything, to perfect our faith, to bring us to maturity and completion, to shape us and refine us into the people he always dreamed and imagined us to be, people that look a little more like Jesus. That's the potential of these broken moments. They truly can be holy moments, and Jesus showed us that on Good Friday. He also showed us that sometimes it's necessary for everything to be brought to the ground, to come crashing down before something new can rise up from the rubble. That's the good part of the story. That's why we're going to gather together on Sunday and celebrate. And we hope that you can join us for what I can promise will be a holy moment. We have two services, one at 9 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. That 10:30 service will also be online, so whether you can join us in person or only check in online, we hope you can join us and celebrate the resurrection and the good news and the hope of that holy moment.